Hi everyone, thanks for joining. We've got a webinar on overcoming the security challenges of hybrid working. My name's Tamid, I'm the sales manager here at Modality. We've got a great set of speakers lined up today for you guys. Jack, if you want to pop to the next screen. We've got Chris Williams, who's the channel sales lead from Microsoft. He's going to be going through the future of work, especially in the environment that we are in today. We have Lloyd Scott, who's one of the account directors within Modality. He'll be going through security, especially in this hybrid working environment. We've got Harpal from Redstor, and he's going to go through why backup's so important still and why it should be a key part of your plans. And then right at the end, we've got Jack, who's one of our pre-sales consultants. We'll do a quick Q&A. We've already got some questions that have come through before the webinar, just about some common scenarios that we can take advantage of within M365. So I'll hand over to Chris.
Cool, thank you very much, Tamid, and seamlessly done, Jack. Thank you kindly. So thank you for those that have managed to join. Hope the year's treating you all well so far. As Tamid mentioned, my name is Chris Williams. I work in the channel sales team in Microsoft. And for clarity, my focus is on our modern work and security solutions, and I work with a small number of partners here in the UK, of which Modality are one. My role is to support our UK commercial customers in their cloud transformation projects, sometimes leveraging our funded Microsoft programs, supporting collateral, but I'll touch on a couple of those a little bit later on. So let me get started. You can all see the quote on the screen from Satya Nadella. Whether you're familiar with it from back last year, I think we probably all agree, we all feel and know how much the working world has changed over the last couple of years. And what Satya Nadella said last year was, over the past year, no area has undergone more rapid transformation than the way that we work, and as the world recovers, there's no going back. And we continue to see this evolve as more businesses establish what the new norm looks like for them, because really prominent in that quote from Satya is there's no going back. For a lot of businesses, there will be a new norm as opposed to going back to the norm. So if we can just move on one slide, please, Jack. The questions regularly posed, what are our thoughts on the future? And our thoughts are the hybrid conversation's here to stay. And why we think that is because customers tell us so. You know, we regularly speak to our customers, our partners, we complete studies and surveys to help us understand, number one, the requirements. You know, what can we do within our solutions to support our current and potential customers? And one of the surveys that we complete, one of the studies we complete, is called the Work Trend Study. I mean, if you click on one slide, please, Jack. Most recently, and there's actually another Work Trend Study that's due to be released in February or March of this year, but the most recent one was responded to by about 32,000 people, so fair representation in terms of opinion, and about 10% of that was out of the UK. So again, from a UK perspective, we've got a fair representation here. And you can see on the screen a notable stat that came out from the study. You know, 71% of the people surveyed want flexible remote working options to stay. So from a colleague perspective, it's maybe not surprising that there should be a desire for flexible remote options staying, you know, thinking about the commute and the time saved, the cost saved, carbon footprint impact, you know, potentially while avoiding your possible arch nemesis that might have been the M25, M4, A14, A12, maybe a combination of all. Whatever the case, less time spent commuting, more time with family, more productive in the workplace. The benefit was felt by colleagues, by employees. And from a business perspective, prior to the pandemic, there'll probably be a lot of organisations that were questioning as to how could they approach flexible working, but they had questions on what will be the impact on my business. You know, will my workforce be productive? What will happen to sales? What will happen to profitability? How am I best to approach it? And a lot of those questions that might have been there prior to the pandemic, a lot of those questions actually now have answers, as we were all forced into that state of work at pace. And the other stat that you see on the screen, which creates the paradox that's kind of referenced here on the slide, 62% of that same 32,000 people, yes, they said that they want more flexible remote options to stay, but 62% of them said that they want more in-person work or collaboration. There's no getting away from the fact that flexible work is appealing to both the individual and the organisation in a lot of circumstances. But what people do want is that in-person connection, you know, the operative word there being flexible. You know, I've mentioned it, loads of us have felt the benefit, but that doesn't stop people from wanting that in-person connection, you know, the learning about each other, that, you know, the business and the organization creating that culture and the curation of that culture that they want to envelop their colleagues, that sense of purpose you want to drive in your colleagues in your organization. Of course, it's possible to do remotely. So many people, I myself, you know, joined Microsoft internally throughout the pandemic. So many people went through their induction throughout the pandemic. They did it remotely, but it is easier to do in person. And for the, you know, for well-being, that human connection in person, again, not entirely surprising, but it creates that paradox, that challenge that businesses need to address. And bearing all of this in mind, we see the future of work being hybrid. And we see more and more organisations are thinking the same thing, not only through conversation, but also through, you know, gentle analysis. You know, if we look at flexible or hybrid working appearing in job adverts, you know, on LinkedIn, there's 5 times more job adverts, including those as a benefit over the last year. That's why we believe, accompanied with loads of other points, that the hybrid workplace is here to stay. That's the new norm. And a couple of the considerations that, you know, businesses need to make when they think about their hybrid working strategy: collaboration, communication. How are you going to drive the collaboration in your organization, you know, in that hybrid workplace, utilizing solutions such as Office 365, co-authoring, you know, asynchronously collaborating on documents, communication through Teams, helping colleagues to engage with each other, and equally thinking about how do you make those meetings that might take place more accessible, or as accessible, to both people that are there in person and virtual attendees. What devices kind of plug into that conversation, into that strategy to support that? And importantly, as is the premise of a lot of this webinar, security. And we're going to centre on this. Jack, if you can just click on to the next slide for me, please. So yeah, security. As I say, the premise of a lot of this webinar and conversation, that I mentioned it before, the pandemic put us on an accelerated path. We had to move at pace in terms of digital transformation, you know, and from an organisation perspective, it brought to light loads of different challenges that needed to be faced. You know, we've kind of touched on it. The where we work changed. You know, businesses needed to cope with the employees need to access and communicate information outside of what might have been previously considered the usual security perimeter. You know, we've had to evolve to that rapid mix of locations. So how we protect the organisation needs to have that change in mind. You know, so no matter where the workers are, my bedroom, your office, Lloyd's kitchen, Harpal's living room, Tamed, not sure if you're in Barcelona, Jack, you're in the office. So helping protect both the user and the organisation, bearing that in mind, is vital. They need access to a variety of different tools that are essential to being productive, but they need to be secure when doing so. And you know, throughout that period of time, and equally more so now, what we're also seeing is, you know, an increase in use of personal devices. You know, it can be difficult to manage and protect without having the right solutions and policies and processes in place. You know, we at Microsoft, we rolled out Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So all colleagues, whether, you know, they're working at home or in the office, they were required to have it on every device that needed access to corporate resources, helping protect, as I say, both the user and the organisation. And in terms of why the security is important, we can't forget that, you know, we're dealing with an increasing volume and sophistication in terms of the threats that are there. We've all seen and heard the headlines around Nebellium, Colonial Pipeline, the ones that grab the headlines. But I think it was something like 45%, a government survey, it was about 45% of UK businesses were subject to a cyber attack in the last year. The threat landscape has and does continue to evolve. So having the right solutions and policies in place is vital. And the framework that we adopt and endorse here at Microsoft is a zero trust framework. The new reality that we've kind of alluded to there, it requires that zero trust approach to security. It's more important than ever that we verify explicitly, use least privileged access, and assuming breach. And without stealing some of Lloyd's talk track, as he's going to talk a little bit more about zero trust, I'll move on from that point. But not only to that, before I touch a little bit on programs before handing over to Lloyd, user education is also key. Underpinning all of what I've touched on there and what Lloyd will talk to is skills and education of employees in the business. You know, their role in keeping the organisation secure, regular updates and education training, avoid that culture of blame to help build a strong, secure organisation. So I mentioned earlier on around programs, resources. There are programs and resources aplenty. Following the webinar, there's the ability to be able to connect with the modality team. They would be more than happy to discuss with you your transformation projects, however far along they are, whether they're at inception or you're underway and you need support from modality. But we've got solution assessments where we've got a range of different assessments, data and infrastructure migration, help you to understand how do we make that move from on-prem into the cloud, what would it look like, total cost of ownership, operational benefits, and equally providing you an understanding, you know, from a sustainability perspective, what's the impact on your carbon footprint versus having on-prem into Azure. And the point of the webinar, we're talking about security, cloud security assessment, helping you to understand your organization's security posture, while also sharing remediation activities and how Microsoft solutions that you have but maybe aren't utilizing or could benefit from support the findings that are specific to your business. As I say, multiple different assessments outside of that. But we've also got the Cloud Accelerator workshops, and we've got a number of different workshops again which modality can look to support you with, and these range from transitioning to cloud, securing identities, threat protection, endpoint management, employee engagement through Viva, and more. There are multiple different workshops in place to support you with a deeper conversation, helping you understand through live demonstrations in your environment what your journey, what your plan should look like with that particular workshop in mind. So as mentioned, if there's any of those programs or equally you want to understand more modality, and we'll be happy to converse post this webinar. But before I take up any more time, Lloyd, I'm going to hand over to you for a conversation around zero trust.
Thank you very much. And thanks to everyone who's joined. So how do we meet the hybrid challenge? I think in the past, a lot of organisations have traditionally focused on defences that really protect network access. So on-premise firewalls, VPNs, and they've traditionally made the assumption that everything inside that network was safe. But I think, as Chris has pointed to, where we work, the tools we're using, and how we do work has changed. And because of this, so too have our data footprints. I think they've expanded in response, and increasingly more and more of our organisation's data and IT services are straddling across multiple hybrid networks. So the real challenge this raises for an organisation is how do we go about securing this new way of working without making it difficult for users to continue to carry on working. So having good IT security shouldn't mean organisational departments and teams struggle to carry out their jobs. So today's organisations really need a new security model, one that more effectively adapts to the complexity of the modern environment, but also one that has a flexible approach to user identity, devices, applications and data, regardless of where they're located or reside. Next slide, please. I've always wanted to do it. So really to help its customers meet this challenge, Microsoft has adopted and developed its security proposition around a zero trust approach. And that approach really rests on three key principles. The first of these is that we should always be authenticating and authorizing users based on all available data points. So they might include our user's identity, location, device health, service or workload, and data classification. To kind of give a bit of an example of what that might look like, let's say our user normally logs in at home in London, some point between 7 AM and 9 AM GMT, but today they've logged in from a location in Germany, say Frankfurt, and they've done that at 7 o'clock at night. That change in behaviour could and really should be considered a security concern, and one that warrants an investigation to ensure that it's our user and not a malicious actor. The second principle is applying least privilege access to our users. This means that we look to limit users' access to one that is both just in time and just enough access for their roles and responsibilities. And you might be thinking, well, duh, of course, but it's really common for us at Modality to be talking to customers who believe they've taken this approach. But when you start to dig a little bit deeper, they've only really started to scratch the surface of what's possible with Microsoft. An example, in many cases, we speak to a lot of customers who've got system administrators who have got entire access across their M365 domain. What this means is if that user is ever breached, and obviously we need to remember here that no security solution is entirely secure, it's not entirely 100%. We would now have we'd now have a user who's been breached, but they've also got the entire keys to the kingdom. They'd have entire access across your estate. So it's really important that organisations use just in time, just enough access, using risk-based adaptive policies, and employ a data protection scheme to help secure both data and productivity. Moving on then, we've also got the IT team should always assume breach. This isn't to say that you have been, but anytime you speak to somebody and they say they've never been hacked and they've never been breached, they're normally an organisation who have, they're just completely unaware that they've been breached. An example I was reading the other day, a recent report looked at the amount of time it took for a breach to take place versus the amount of time it takes for somebody within IT to be aware of that breach. Now, on average, it only takes a few minutes for a breach to take place in over 80% of attacks, but it can take months and sometimes even years for 70% of these organisations to be aware that they've been breached. So to minimise blast radius, we need to segment access in the event of a breach, so that organisations have got to have systems, processes in place that verify the end-to-end encryption, uses analytics to get visibility, and drives threat detection to improve defences that you can monitor in real time, live as it happens. Next slide, please. Thank you, Jack. So the second element then that we at Microsoft see organisations needing to take as part of this security posture is how and where we apply zero trust. And with no single security element being 100%, organisations need to look to employ zero trust using a defence in depth methodology. So we need to look at layering security over the various areas of risk of breach. If one of these mechanisms were to fail, it enables another one to step up immediately to halt that breach or attack. And this multi-layered approach with intentional redundancies will only increase the security of a system as a whole and will help address many of the different attack vectors malicious actors may use. Now, we see there being 6 primary areas, I think Microsoft do too, where an organisation should really be looking to apply zero trust. So I think one of them is looking like I've lost in transit. So we've got our user's identity. We've got the endpoints that our users are using to access systems and data across the organisation. And I think this one's really important. And again, going back to what Chris said earlier, as organisations move to a hybrid remote way of working, the different devices or endpoints that our users are now going to be accessing the systems on are going to be very varied. It's no longer just the case that a user logs into a PC in our offices. They can log in on a mobile, they can log in on a tablet, their own device. So we need to know that those endpoints are secure. And then we can look down then at the applicational level. Organisational teams and staff are using to carry out their work. Increasingly, it isn't IT that determines what applications we're using in a workplace. More and more, we've got HR, marketing, sales going to the IT organisation of a business and saying, we want this, we want that. And it's then our IT team's job to make sure that those applications are secure. And then obviously we've got the very traditional infrastructure and network piece that we need to ensure that's secure. And lastly, and probably most importantly, is the structured and unstructured data that's often very sensitive and business critical. We need to ensure that we're putting in systems and we're applying that zero trust methodology across our data to ensure it's secure. Next slide, please. So that seems all very complicated and there's a lot there for organisations to consider, but thankfully Microsoft have done something to help us all a little bit. So in order to help organisations adopt this zero trust approach across our defence in depth method, Microsoft have developed an integrated security suite that delivers an intelligent, unified defence solution, one that provides comprehensive protection against attacks and takes a 360-degree approach that effectively secures our hybrid working environments. And it does that by using and leveraging the world's largest and most trusted, committed security presence in the market, which is Microsoft. So Microsoft's integrated security takes a holistic approach to securing your organisation's IT and data environment. And they do this across 4 key vectors. So we've got identity and access management, threat protection, information protection, and then our security and management. So what I'll do next is I'll go into what those 4 different vectors look like within a Microsoft world. Next slide, please. Taking a look first at identity and access management. In a hybrid environment, users are no longer logging into an organisation's desktop in an office, where the applications that they use and the data that they access sit on your servers. Instead, users, devices and applications are sitting across a range of different platforms, some of which, thankfully, are still controlled by IT, but increasingly more that are owned and maintained by third parties. So the first of the 3 areas I want us to look at is Microsoft's identity and access piece, because here solutions and technologies are designed specifically with the intent to prove users are authenticated and authorized before they have got access, or they're granted, access to your applications and data, regardless of where they sit. So be that on-prem or in the cloud. And with identity as the new control plane and perimeter, it's really important to protect those identities in order to protect your organization from a breach. Now, Modality and Microsoft look to help customers do this by looking at 3 key areas. The first is protecting at the front door. So no matter where your users log in from, be that at home, in the workplace, or their mobile, or if you're like Tamid, sitting in Portugal with your video off, we want to ensure that we've put in place systems and tools that enable us to validate a user before they're granted any access to our applications and data. Now, the primary tools that we can look to do this with in conjunction with Microsoft are things like conditional access, Microsoft's Active Directory, and functions and features, taking an approach that is specific to each organisation and one that reflects the way your organisation and teams are structured and work. The second piece of that is that security really needs to be simple. If not, users will only look to bypass that protection and it becomes redundant. Now, passwords are no longer sustainable. They're really weak and they're not the best form of authentication anymore. However, using tools like Microsoft Windows Hello, we can improve the strength of our first line of defence, but also make it easier for our users to access and carry out the work that we need them to do. And the last piece of that, and one that we need to look at, is that we know that our credentials, be those privileged or non-privileged users, are both protected and secure. And Microsoft gives us that confidence, in this case, with the use of Windows Credential Guard. Now, the next step in the security journey that we see for customers is looking at that threat protection piece. Here we look at how organisations can protect themselves from attacks, detect them, and how reasonably quickly they can respond to those if they are breached. And again, we look at, when we're working with customers, 3 really simple and easy steps to help you achieve this. The first is really to enable an organisation to protect themselves from an advanced cyber attack. And again, we can look to do this with native tools to Microsoft. So things such as Exchange Online Protection that will protect and prevent broad volume-based known attacks such as phishing and spam, all the way through to implementing some more advanced features and tools such as user and domain impersonation protection. And the next piece of the puzzle then is looking at our ability to detect detect those breaches as they happen. As we touched upon earlier, a lot of those breaches take months for us to realise that they've taken place. Some instances, even years. So that's months and years where that data is potentially at risk of being exposed or used for malicious intent. However, what we look to do again in conjunction with Microsoft is essentially put in place systems and processes and tools that will enable you to detect malicious activity as it happens. We can look to implement things such as Threat Explorer and Threat Tracker, to name just 2. And again, we've touched upon it a couple of times. But since no security solution is ever 100% effective, we need to have processes and tools in place to allow you to quickly respond to those threats, which enable damage control and limit the effects from an attack. And this can be done with tools such as This can be done with tools such as 0-hour auto purge, or ZAP, that will retrospectively detect and neutralize malicious phishing and spam or malware messages that may have already been delivered to your Exchange online platforms. And then moving on to the next and probably the most important piece of the puzzle, we think. You can go next slide, please, Jack. Thank you very much. Here we look at information protection. So we've looked at obviously securing the identity and access of our users. We've then looked at live threat protection, and then we're moving on to the data, which I think is probably the most important part of all of this, right? And here there are 4 primary elements of the information lifecycle that we really want to be able to help customers understand and get a handle on. So we want you to be able to detect data both at rest and at transit, so as it moves from one location to another. We need to be able to classify what the data is, and that enables us to protect it. And then we want to go about being able to monitor that data. We want visibility, logs of who's had access to that data, when, where, and how. Now, Microsoft's information protection solutions address each of these steps. This includes protecting sensitive information across both devices, SaaS applications, cloud services, as well as your on-premise infrastructure. So I think it really starts to touch upon across all 4 of those areas of a hybrid working environment. So it's really important that we nail that piece of the puzzle down. And again, some of the tools that we can look to deploy and help customers really get a handle on that are things like Azure Information Protection, Microsoft Intune, Windows Information Protection. And then the last piece of that Microsoft puzzle is really how we go about managing that as an IT team. So I think this is really where Microsoft starts to differentiate itself really from the rest of the competitors in the marketplace. They really enable customers to get control and visibility of their entire security estate. Now, an effective security management solution isn't about a single console. Effective security management really needs to integrate where it counts, but it also needs to offer you, the customer, the specialized tools that you need for different functions within the business. So leaning on modality and Microsoft's expertise, we can help you consolidate from a lot of vendors and a lot of tools to ensure, down to a few, to really ensure that your teams have got the flexibility and freedom to manage security that really sort of matches and reflects that unique need, whether that's identity, devices, apps, or even your infrastructure. And I think the real key differentiator here for Microsoft is really in how these different systems start to talk to each other. So with Microsoft, intelligence is shared in the back end through Intelligent Security Graph, and it harnesses the power of machine learning to process trillions. I've had a look at the numbers and it's quite scary. Trillions of pieces of data from billions of devices to ensure that your security is up to date at all times. Now, the key for a CISO's success is in managing security is not about a single console across everything, but integration where it makes sense. And that's something that Microsoft and Modality can help customers achieve with a single management platform in Microsoft. So really, I think just to conclude there then, looking at helping customers understand and adopt a zero trust approach using a defense in depth security posture. And by utilizing and leveraging Microsoft's experience and tool set, we can help you secure your hybrid environment, but also give your teams the flexibility they need to deliver great user experience for that workforce anywhere in the world. Now, as touched upon a couple of times today, no security proposition is foolproof. And so we need to ensure that we've got systems and processes that sit in the background to make sure that your data, which is often very sensitive and business critical, is safe and secure. So I think that naturally leads me on to introducing you to Harpal from our partner Redstor, who would like to run through why there's a little bit more to securing a hybrid environment than just focusing on security tools. So over to you, Harpal.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. You've already introduced me. Yeah, just to add to that, my name's Harpal. I'm a senior account manager at Redstor, where I've been for the last 9 years. And as Chris and Lloyd have already mentioned, in the last 24 months, we've seen significant changes with regards to how organisations and how users are working. I think we've probably seen 10 years worth of changes in technology in just in the last 2, so to say. With this in mind, we've seen drivers and threats, which is forced, it's compelled organisations to really review how they go about protecting their data and really ensuring that the service, the solution they've got in place is still relevant in the new world. Data, as you're more than aware, it's now sprawled across multiple platforms. Lockdown last year very much accelerated this, and now you've got multiple data silos that require protection. 5 years ago, your average business could just be reliant on having to protect data on their internal machines. Nowadays, a single business, they'll have data on internal machines hosted on public cloud platforms like Azure, on G Suite 365, and your average user will still save data locally as well. All this has meant organizations are really having to review their data management regimes to ensure in the new world that data, regardless where it is still being protected. Public cloud platforms, they do offer their own inbuilt data protection service, but it's important to highlight a lot of organizations, they don't want to protect their data on the same platform their infrastructure is hosted. You want to avoid that single point of failure. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, so to say. Not only are there drivers, we've also seen threats forcing organizations to act. We've already spoken about ransomware, which you can imagine is very topical, and attacks are on the rise. According to one statistic, FBI, we see an average of 4,000 ransomware incidents daily and the annual cost of $1 billion a year. We're actually seeing ransomware being built to purposely target on-premise backup solutions, because they know, look, once they've infected, once they've locked your backups, that they've pretty much taken your last line of defense. And even if a viable backup does exist, restoring systems from backups, it's not always an easy option for organizations where IT departments, they're understaffed, they're underfunded. Security experts at the FBI, they advise never paying so-called data nappies, because often they don't restore access to the data even once you pay the ransom. You've also got things like insider threats, and they're very hard to detect, because these are people you've given legitimate access to the system, to the data, which, unlike external bad actors, so to say, where you put all the security policies, tools in place to defend against. So look, the drivers, the threats, in some cases they do speak for themselves. With that in mind, I'm always keen to really highlight the USPs within the modality data protection service that helps differentiate the service from the crowd. I'm always keen to stress that the backup market, it's very saturated, and pricing, if that's often the key driving factor, you can go on download.com to get something for free. But yeah, the emphasis is the backup is a means to an end. The most important factor is the ease and the speed of recovery. And look, if you were to lose your data today, how quick could you get it back? How quick would it be to resume operations? Now, thanks for that, Jack. There's a number of USPs. I'm not going to bore you with going through each and every factor, but I suppose it'd be good just to highlight some of the key reasons why the customers choose the modality data protection service over the competition. Simplicity is very much at the heart of everything we do. We ensure the service is very easy to set up. There's no 2-week training course required. It's very much a set and forget solution that requires minimal human intervention. There's no hardware. It's a true cloud solution that can scale up as your business grows or scale down where required. So there's no upfront cost with regards to sweating out hardware for 3 or 5 years, so to say. I suppose our key USP within the service is the instant data feature. As I've already mentioned, backup, it's simple. The challenge is really getting that data back quickly and easily. And that's where we tend to start addressing the elephant in the room, because it takes an awful long time to send data via a limited bandwidth. And the analogy we always tend to use is Netflix. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows how it works. And I always go back to 10 years ago. You used to download torrent movies. You couldn't watch the movie until the download had complete. Nowadays, we stream everything. With instant data, we provide the ability to access the data you need to resume operations, rather than having to wait to recover a full restore, being able to access the data. And the point with instant data is forget backup. That's easy. Focus on recovery, focus on the speed of recovery. Importantly as well, the service incorporates the ability to protect data, whether it's on-prem, whether it's hosted on a cloud platform, whether it's on 365 or G Suite, or on a remote umbrella site, or even an endpoint. Everything is managed through a single console, and we've also built in malware detection, ensuring all data is recovered free from malware. Next slide, please. The final USP, and really where our service differs from the competition, is really the simplicity of the pricing model. A lot of the competition, they've got upfront hardware commitments, whether it's based on CPU, RAM, the number of machines, the number of users, the additional grey costs for egress. There's no upfront costs. We operate on a simple per gig per terabyte model. If your existing estate consists of 100 Office 365 users using Mail, OneDrive, SharePoint, you've got a terabyte, or alternatively, you've got one file server with 10 users on Mail, and that consists of a terabyte. The actual monthly investment is still the same as well. And next slide. And the last slide from my side is the wagon wheel. It's a bit of a busy slide, but it's a really interesting slide because it's changed and gone through multiple iterations as our offering has evolved, so to say. As a software, the actual service, it very much started as a rock solid backup solution. It was protecting data on desktop servers, SQL databases. As we've developed the service, this wagon wheel, it's really evolved, and now we protect data on several different sources. In particular, where we've seen the most growth is SaaS applications such as 365, Google Workspace, Xero, and even Salesforce now. So what this means from an organization's point of view is, with this service, you can protect data, whether you've got it on the old legacy platforms, onto SaaS applications, and even onto cloud native infrastructure as well, on Kubernetes, for example. And most importantly, you can do this and protect all that data regardless where it is, through a single console, through the modality data protection offering. On the right hand side, we always like to emphasize that the software is target agnostic. We're seeing an increase in the importance in being able to decouple software from storage. A lot of organizations, they want to be able to manage and port data from one environment to another. So again, if your software, if it's tied to a specific appliance or storage platform, it does make managing that service a lot more difficult. So to emphasize, the service can protect data across multiple sources. We offer a unique method around how we recover that data through that instant data functionality. It's a target agnostic solution, hardware free, where customers require data sovereignty in a particular region. We utilize the Azure platform to be able to assist and meet in compliance requirements. And fundamentally, just to emphasize, it's more than just being able to back up your data. It's being able to simplify and streamline that restore process, and being able to ensure that data is protected regardless of the source of that data, regardless of the location, and also making sure that when you actually instigate that restore, the data is being recovered free from malware as well. Back to yourselves.
Okay, thanks very much, Harpal, and thanks Lloyd and Chris as well. Some really good info from all three of you there. So we'll just quickly move on to the Q&A. As Tamid said at the start, we had a few questions in pre-webinar. I don't know if any more have come through. Can someone just check the Q&A box, because I can't view it whilst I'm presenting. So question one was, what's the best way to upskill your team in the ever-changing Microsoft security stack? As an SMB, we find it difficult to keep up with the rate of change and new features. So that's a really good question. I think there's, first off, start in places like Microsoft Learn. There's a whole load of content out there across the whole Microsoft security stack on Microsoft Learn. Loads of guided tutorials, loads of ways of upskilling your team there. There's a bunch of content on YouTube, which is really good. I think it's important for businesses to sort of incentivize people, like getting certificates and getting trained in things. So reward staff who are up for bettering themselves and doing that. And then lastly, obviously partner with a Microsoft partner. Modality, we know the security stack off by heart. You can partner with us in a number of different ways. You could take on a fully managed security service, or you could look at something a bit more hybrid, where perhaps we look after a SOC based around Sentinel for you or something, and we can provide that 24-hour piece for you. We can sort of supplement and help your internal IT teams. We can also do like data protection as a service as well. So they're the key ways of hitting that one, I think. Another question that came through, which perhaps Chris or Lloyd would like to step in on, is how do we go about getting on these funded programs with you?
That is a good question. Lloyd, I will save you from coming off mute unless you've already.
No, I'm off mute. I'm quite I'm really indifferent on answering, to be honest. I think you fire then, Chris, and I think if there's anything I think it might be pertinent to add, I can go ahead and do that, I suppose.
So yeah, absolutely. I think the first point of call is engaging conversation with your chosen partner or modality. As I say, modality have got the ability to be able to perform the workshops. Engage with the modality team to talk through your transformation project, to identify, number one, as to which of the workshops would be relevant for you, so that they can then explore eligibility and have a conversation. As I say, I work very closely with the modality team, have a conversation with myself about progressing with the nomination for those funded workshops, where we would look to provide the funding to modality to complete the workshop. So really, in answer to that, Jack, I would say is engage with the modality team post webinar to explore what workshops would be best fit for their business.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add to that, of course, there are various and numerous incentives, approaches, training, education, support that Microsoft offer through a huge partner network that includes, not just ourselves, but many other organizations. So if you're already working with somebody, reach out to them, of course. But as a fast track ready partner, Modality are in a fabulous place to be able to have an initial conversation with you, and then start to look at what programs and assistance we can offer you in conjunction and in support with Microsoft, right? It is a partnership that we have, and everything we look to do is in conjunction and in line with what Microsoft are doing for customers out there. So yeah, absolutely engage with us or your existing partner, and we'll certainly be able to open the doors to what Microsoft have got on offer and available for customers out there.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lloyd. Kate, Harpal, this one's for you. Where is the backup data hosted in Redstor, and can we choose what location we want it in?
Absolutely, yeah, great question as well. So we back up to 2 UK-based data centres. The primary data centres in Slough, the secondary data centres in Reading, both a tier 3 data centre facility. In terms of the hardware, is all owned and managed by Redstor. Where I have customers, where they require having data sovereignty requirements in Europe, North America, Asia, etc. What we do with those particular requirements is we utilize the Azure platform in that country of origin. So for example, I'm conscious Germany for one is very strict around how they keep their data, ensuring that data remains in country. We back up the data to Azure Germany, so to say. From a front end point of view, Mr. Customer sees no different. It's all still backed up through a single console. Everything's managed through different collections. So one particular customer, they've got different collections, which UK, Germany, etc. So they just put whichever machine backup they want into those different collections. On the storage platform, though, it clearly said storage platform Azure.de, for example, which would be Germany. So yeah, we can definitely meet the requirement where compliance requirements are required, so to say, to ensure that data stays in the country.
Great, thanks very much, Harpal. Okay, next one. I think we should throw it open and ask each person what their opinion is on this one. It's what do you guys see as the next big thing in security? So is that the next big technology that's going to help us with security, the next big threat that's coming, or just something like that? What do you see over the next year happening? So Harpal, go for it.
Do you know what? I think we're seeing a lot of threats from a security point of view. I think it's a bit, ransomware is definitely a big one, but it's the fact that they're going after your backups. That to me is just alarming people overnight, because I think when they've got a hold of your data in one way, shape or form, I think you've got that sense of confidence. If if the business has got, you know, enough investment in their backups, they'll be able to give it a bit of a right, okay, we've got our backups, we've still got something to fall back on. But where organizations are still backing up in network, you can imagine I speak to a lot of IT managers and some will say, yeah, no, I've got it off site, it's at a second site. It's just emphasizing that's still within your network. We've had multiple examples of customers where they've been hit by ransomware and it's encrypted their on-premise backups, and they've been grateful for the ability to be able to recover from Redstor's off-site backup solution. But we're coming across that more and more, and also the requirement to protect data on cloud platforms like 365. I think by Microsoft's own admission, 80% of data on 365 is not protected outside of Microsoft, so to say. And there's a growing requirement, and we've seen that especially over the last 24 months since lockdown. I remember myself personally, I never used Teams before March 2020. Now you can't go a day without using Teams. So yeah, I think there's that growing requirement to ensure data on cloud platforms, not just 365, but G Suite, Salesforce. We're getting asked questions around all kinds of cloud platforms because people don't want to be at the mercy of that platform provider.
Brilliant. Great answer. Thanks very much, Harpal. Chris, do you want to chime in with something there?
Yeah, I'm going to keep mine fairly short and sweet. Not saying that yours wasn't, Harpal, but I'm going to keep mine fairly short and sweet. So from a security perspective, we've kind of already alluded to it earlier on in the webinar. Things move at pace. So what we talk about now, what we talk about in a week's time, there's a new conversation to have. So from a what's next in Microsoft security, there's actually an event in February called What's Next in Microsoft Security. So I'd encourage people to go and take a look at that event. In addition to that, we've got the Microsoft security blog so that you can stay up to date with it. But I think in terms of kind of like a pertinent point from security that I think we've talked about throughout this and will continue to be a pivotal point for organizations. There are solutions in place that can support the organization, but I think it's that user education. You touched on it at the beginning in terms of that first question that you had in, Jack, was how do we drive that education within our organization? So I think that's the pertinent point. That's the piece to also think about and focus on. But for the what's next in security, there's an event in February that Microsoft are hosting, so I might point in that direction.
Great, thanks very much, Chris. And Lloyd?
Well, in research for today's webinar, I came across something which may or may not be one for us all to worry about, I suppose, in the near future. I think security is moving increasingly towards AI as a form of defence. And I've had a little look yesterday at something called data poisoning, where malicious intent actors are actually starting to influence the way that AI learns for it to then create outcomes that then can create cyber threats. So looking at manipulating search engines and things like that, so that when we're Googling stuff, as an example, we're pushed towards malicious links and things like that. So I think that's probably something that's going to be on the horizon, having read that but yeah, it's impossible to know, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. So I wrote a quick one to this, and I think it's kind of similar, Lloyd, but I think there'll just be more automation in cyber attacks. So the same way that we're automating things to secure ourselves, and other industries are automating things like checkouts and stuff, self-checkouts. So automation, that's going to take over. Cyber threats are going to be the same. There will be, there's lists of websites of servers that are available and have open RDP and stuff. So people will be able to just hit a button, it will go off, find exposed vulnerable servers and things on the internet, and just start hammering them with some ransomware. So I think that's at that point, it kind of ties in nicely with how SMBs are going to be on that list, and they're not going to fly under the radar just because they're small. It's they're not looking at the size of the business and really targeting it. It's just going to be a blanket, go out and do it. So you need to automate your security and start using all of these Microsoft features that we've spoken about today. So once again, thanks everyone for coming along. I hope you all found it useful. And just to cover a couple of things off, Like we said before, make use of the funded workshops from Microsoft. They're really invaluable resources and can kickstart your journey into these areas that we've spoken about today. Modality also run an M365 review workshop where we'll look at your M365 license utilization, and then we'll pick up on areas, and security is one of the big areas that we see a lot of clients aren't necessarily using the features they've already got within their licensing. So yeah, speak to us about an M365 licensing review, and we will help you to be more secure, more productive and more collaborative. If you want to get in touch with us, it's sales@modalitysystems.com. If not, we're all on LinkedIn, so reach out to us on there. And we'll also be actively reaching out to any of those of you who qualify for these types of things who are on the call today. So yeah, that's it for today. Thanks very much for coming, everyone.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you all. Bye bye.